Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Suzanne, and I am chairman of the Philatelic Traders Society. So just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for joining us at the world's first international virtual stamp show. I have the great honour today to introduce this morning's talk from Olivier Stocker, who is the CEO and chairman of our show sponsors, Spink and Sons. Is kind of a rare and wonderful opportunity. I'm sure many of you will thoroughly enjoy this talk this morning. But Olivier will be talking to us about auctions. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the talk, so please have a think about what questions you want to ask and use the Q&A button at the bottom to type out what those questions are, and we'll come to those at the end. So over to you, Olivier. Have fun.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. Good morning to everybody attending this chat. I know it's not easy to listen about auctions at 10 a.m. in the morning, and I know a lot of you guys were online. I was also online last night for the New York Collectors Club presentation, which was very well attended. Was very, very good. And so now you're probably in front of your, third coffee or teacup. So I know it will be difficult for me. So that's why I've decided to make a presentation a bit provocative, and I do apologize for that in advance. And that's the way I found to try to get your attention early in the morning. So we are going to talk about auctions, and when I was looking at, for the title page, I thought about this 1972 movie from Woody Allen. You might remember it. It was not his greatest movie ever. Everything you always wanted to know about sex, and of course I've changed that into auction. And because it's true that there is a lot of things, auction is a bit of a taboo. Like the other topic of the movie, and there is nothing complicated, but sometimes people don't know enough about auction, and when they come to auction they are not fully prepared, and that's what we wanted to do. So today we'll talk, after a quick introduction, we'll talk about some misconceptions about auctions. We are talking to what to do 20 years before the sale, and of course Spink is a company 354 years old, so we have the benefit and the luxury of long-term thinking and strategy. So how you choose the man or the woman for the job, that will be your team when you go to the market, what you have to do on auction day. And then, of course, the 20 years after the auction, how you live your new life, how you move on to something else. We've got a lot of experience about that. And I will conclude with what I think is our 10 commandments, if I dare say so, about, for you to ponder when you think about going to auction. So just a few things about the speaker. I've been, before becoming the chairman and CEO of Spink 15 years ago, I was a banker, so nobody is perfect. I was with JP Morgan for 15 years. And the reason I mentioned that is because it's quite interesting. One of my jobs was to be head of equity capital markets for Asia. So I was doing a lot of IPOs, raising money, convertible bonds, block trades for large companies in Asia. And the reason I mentioned that is because from the beginning, when I first joined Spink, I immediately realized that doing an auction is actually very similar to raising capital for a company. And the reason of that is because like when you do a transaction for a company, the level of risk, the level of marketing could be different. You can have a block trade, which is done without documentation overnight, or you can have a fully documented IPO with prospectus and so on. So in auction is the same. When you sell your auction, you have various options. You can sell it for a fixed price. You can do a fully marketed offering. And depending on how much risk you ask your auctioneer to take, the cursor in terms of the fees will move alongside the risk cursor, i.e. the more risk you ask your auctioneer or your investment bank for that matter to take, the higher the fees might be. But everything is possible, you know, and that's very, very important to know. There is no rules of auction in terms of what you can ask your auctioneer. You just speak to them, and if you ask for the moon, it will be more expensive than if you ask for a simple thing, but absolutely everything is possible. You know, what is interesting also for me at Spink is in the last 15, 16 years, I've done over 900 auctions of collectibles in New York, London, Hong Kong, Singapore, Milan, Paris, Tokyo, all collectibles. So I think I've got a good understanding now of what's happening in the world of collectibles. There are some trends which are different, some trends which are appearing in, you know, in banknotes before they appear in stamps or whatever. So it's very, very interesting to look at the collectibles as a space. And of course, today we'll focus on the stamps. You know, for Spink, by being active in other segments, it gives us a really unique view in the marketplace about what's really happening in the world of collectibles, what's in, what is out, and also myself. I'm a collector of stamps and banknotes. I tend to be a closet collector, so I collect very discreetly. Nobody knows what I do. And then once in a while, I come up with a collection and I exhibit. I've shown one of my stamp collection, and I don't have much time, as you can imagine, but my intention is to continue to exhibit progressively. And being a collector, and having been a collector for many years, I started collecting at 11. And I'm still have the same collection. My main collection is still the same as when I was 11 years old. I've been on the other side before moving to stamps. I've been on the other side for like 25 years. So I know what it is to deal from a buyer's point of view with dealers, with auction houses, you know, the pitfalls and so on. And as a collector also, I know the psyche of collectors, you know. I would say I love, you know, I understand that people have a thrill for the hunt and the pleasure of the kill. So I'm aware of that, and we try to create that in your auction. So now we will move on to the question you must ask yourself before you start thinking about auctioneering. It's very, very important to do your introspection and the thinking before selling. First of all, you have to ask yourself, where do I sell? You know, what is the location of the auction? Which country, which currency? Is it going to affect my price if I sell in Hong Kong or in New York or whatever? Do you have tax issues? You know, do you have to sell because it's held in a trust or whatever? You have to sell in a certain jurisdiction. And also now in the digital age, I would say compared to a few years ago where it was very important to decide, okay, I sell in Paris, Hong Kong or London or New York. Now the choice is also digital. I think it's less and less important because buyers from all over the world would come to our Spink Live platform. As you know, Suzanne mentioned, we are the main sponsor of the show, and Spink has always been at the forefront of technology. You know, we 2 years ago, we built a system called Spink Live, which is, you know, best in class for live auctioneering. You've got videos, sound. It's a very intuitive thing. You can use it on your Android, your iPhone. It's a great fun thing to have. And today, the question of where is also how. Do I sell with a catalog? Do I sell with an e-auction? Or do I sell with what we call hybrid auction? It's like an e-auction with an auctioneer of a rostrum. So we have plenty of opportunities. So it's very important you start thinking about that. And of course, we can guide you if you engage us. Then you have to ask yourself when. When do you want to sell? You know, do you want to sell after exhibiting one more time your exhibition? Do you want to sell after a show that you like and you attend? You want to sell with context. If your collection is not big enough, you want to wait for a bigger collection in the same area or related. Are you going to sell as a standalone collection or with somebody else, some other materials? So that's a question you must ask yourself. And then, of course, comes the big question, who? And when you sell a collection, you can, of course, use an auction house, and we like you to do that. But you can also do a private treaty with a dealer or with an auction house. And a lot of collections are now being sold And certainly at Spink, we do a lot of private treaty, very discreet. Some we announce, some we never announce, and it's very good. And when you sell a collection, even if you know the buyer, I would strongly recommend to always use a dealer or an auction house as an intermediary. It's a bit like when you sell your house, having a guy in the middle who can manage the expectation, deal with all the issues. It's easier to use somebody for a small fee who will be there, and you always get more even after paying a small fee to the intermediary. Obviously, you can also sell a dealer. If you've been working with a dealer, a prime dealer all your life, you can ask him to buy back from you. But one of the benefits of auction houses, obviously, is that auction houses, the interests are perfectly aligned. You want, because the higher we sell, the higher the commission is. While a dealer, sometimes, the interests are less aligned because he wants to buy cheaply to have a good profit margin, which is absolutely normal. So this who is an important factor, but the most important question is the last one, is basically, why do you want to sell? And that's really, when we have customers coming to us who have clearly answered that question, it makes the whole process much easier. Do you want to sell because you really want the most money possible, and you only care about the money, you don't care about having a catalog with your collection, and you can spread your collection in different selling areas, or you want to have a legacy, you spend 25 years or more building a collection, you really want a super nice catalog, which will be a testimony of your hard work. You want to sell for charity purpose, to give to charity. We do a lot of these charity sales at Spink. Or do you want to sell because you want to remove a burden from your family when you will not be there anymore to have to deal with these sales? So this question why is really, really important. And I would say it's the most important one you have to think before you come and see any auction. So we go 20 years before the sale. What a smart collector who knows he will sell his collection down the road should do. What is very important, you should always feed your understudies with your duplicates. The thing you don't want to do, you don't want to be the only guy or the only woman in the world collecting an area. You want to make sure that there are smaller guys. Of course, everybody likes to be the biggest player in the pool. But you want to make sure that there are also small fishes with you. Maybe they are younger, maybe they have less financial means, but you want to have your understudies, because if you look at the next point, you do not want to uber dominate your field. If you are the only one buying everything and you kill all the competition, people are so so despaired that they cannot buy anything because you buy everything, they will stop collecting. And then when the times come to sell, you will have nobody knowing the area ready to buy from you. So basically my suggestion is really to feed the understudies, but of course you have to be very careful about when you start selling, okay? Because if you start selling a few things too early, you might have somebody who is going to give you competition for the big pieces you miss. So my advice would say you start selling a little bit to develop the understudies when you have acquired all the big pieces in your collection, okay? So you don't have competition for the big pieces, because if you buy a $50,000 item or $10,000 item, if it's a big item in your collection, you want to be, not to have too many competition, because it could double the price. And if it doubles the price on a $50,000 items, it's painful. If you double the price on a $200 item you buy later, it doesn't matter. So that's very important. So timing is everything there. Having said that, that's a smart strategy. But when I apply to my collection, I've not done it myself. So, but it's a mistake. I know it's a mistake because I love my stamps. When I see things I like to buy, I'm not dominating too much my area, but I dominate, and I've not done this feeding of understudies, but that's a smart thing to do. I should do it, and I know, but again, the people who give you advice are not always applying them to themselves. And finally, is to share your knowledge. Because first of all, it's fun, it's important, and this shows watching some of the excellent presentation by people with so much knowledge. It's great. So you can share via these conferences, like what the RPSL does is fantastic too. That's a great thing. And if you have the courage and the time, is also give a book. And the book is very important because it will give a legacy. It's fun to do. It's a great legacy, and it will also attract new collectors. And it's a little bit less true in the world of stamps because we have less new collectors than in coins or banknotes, for example. But when you publish a book, if somebody is interested, they might use the book to start collecting. Certainly in my own case, I started collecting when I was 11 because it was a book which helped me, guide me through my first steps. Without that, I would never have had the confidence to start to do a specialized collection. Basically, also, what is very important is the people today, compared to the great collector of the late 19th century, early 20th century, we tended to be aristocrats with a lot of time and money. Today, the new collectors, they have money, but most of them have no time. They are professional, they are lawyers, accountants, hedge fund managers, and therefore they need help to be guided in their first steps in the collecting. And a book is a great way to do that. So it's very important to share the knowledge at an early stage in your collection. Okay, now the question that all of you have in mind is how to choose. So if you allow me, I will give you 2 slides on how to choose your agent. If you've decided to go through auction, how do you choose the best auction house? Because you go to shows, you see all these names, they all seem to be the same. And it's not easy to choose an auction house. I realize that. So it's very important. It's a time to really be tough and demanding. You engage people, you ask all the questions you need, knowing that if you've never sold, there is an asymmetry of knowledge between you and the auction house who can talk in with a jargon and so on. So it's very, very important to ask questions, even silly questions, and make sure you understand everything on how the game is played, so to speak. So my first advice is don't kill your collection by shopping it around. There is no point to go and see 10 auction houses because they will all tell you the same things. And if somebody tells you something very different, you should probably be a bit worried. So my advice, and also if you shop it around too much, when it comes to the market, everybody knows it will leak. Everybody knows it's there. And when it comes to the market, it will not create the excitement, but it will create a sentiment of déjà vu. What I recommend is really to think long and hard. Maybe you can ask fellow collectors who have sold at auction recently and so on, and really pick, I would say 2, maybe 3, but take 2 houses you think are the best for the job. And then you engage both of them, you ask them tons of questions, you use a question with one to grill the other one and so on. And that's more than enough. And you have to ensure that they are very good at the art of lotting and estimating. And it's not the highest estimates. Like when you sell a house, some people will give you a very high price knowing damn well they will never achieve their price, but they want the mandate. And that's what I call the bait and switch strategy. They show you something very palatable, you want to go with them, but then they will start to take your expectation down and they will get much less than they were telling you at the beginning. And sadly, in the world of auction, it's a very common strategy. And especially among the smaller auction houses who cannot compete with the global presence, the internet and so on, they say, we can get you much more. It's, there is no miracle. So you've got to be very aware of that. And you will find that most of the time, most of the international reputable auction house will come with very similar estimates because we are in the market all the time. We know more or less, how much a collection is worth. The next point is, and I think it's very important also to look at, as I talked about the art of lotting, it's very, very important because this is really an art. It's not a science. It's really only by experience, how to choose, how to group the things, what to put as an individual lots and so on. And of course, the market knowledge, is very important because sometimes you design a lot with a few potential buyers in mind. And it's really an art, it's not a science. One very important question, in today's world, you must ask, this auction house, what do we do in terms of social media presence? How is the live bidding platforms? There are different live bidding platforms. Some are global, some are like SAN in the US, some are designed and super high quality. So you must look at their bidding platforms. If you don't know them, because you've never bought from them, have a look at it. And I think it's very important to be international. As we see in the show today, there are people from all over the world, 24/7. So you've got to have people who can talk to, collectors in China and collectors in South America and so on. So it's very, very important, in addition to the prerequisite, which is of course knowledge and a good service. Also, something is very important is to make sure you have a good contact at the auction house. It's not necessarily the expert who will describe your collection, but it could be somebody from the finance department who've been speaking over the last 20 years, or somebody from the auction team. It's basically your friendly face. And at Spink, we always say, okay, this person is going to be the contact through the entire process. So if you have any questions and so on, you always have somebody at the other end of the phone to answer any questions. And that's very important. And I think I must say that sadly, in the world of auctions, some guys are very good and very helpful when they are pitching. And when the contract is signed, it's almost impossible to get in touch with anybody at the firm. And that's not a nice feeling. And it's very, very important that you have somebody who is appointed to be your point of contact, and somebody, is even better. And then, as you choose your agent, you've got, as we come back to the question of why, you've got to prioritize your objectives. What is important? Is it the tax issues you've got to deal with? Is it the proceeds? Is it, you want to leave a legacy and therefore the catalog is of the utmost importance? Do you want actually to deal with people you like? You want to have fun? It's very important to know why why you are selling, and then it will help you to choose the right guys. Because sometimes the best house, maybe you don't like the people, and it's better to go with another house where the experience will be fun. And selling your collection should be as much fun as building it. And that's really something which is very important for me and everybody at Spink. When you sell, it must be as much fun as when you build it. That's very, very important. We know it's a bit traumatic to sell a collection. Our stamps are very often like our children. So it's tough to let them go. It's like when you put a kid on a train, we feel sad. Letting go of your stamps, there is an element of sadness, for sure. But, we need to find the fun around it to make it light and enjoyable. The next point is, I think it's very important to get a clear understanding in writing. Even if it's not necessarily a contract, it could be an email with bullet points. But the last thing you want to do is you don't want to ruin a 20, 30, 50 years friendship with somebody by, because something has been unclear. You thought you said something, the guy thought something else, and it's not clear. So for me, I always like to make sure that everything is clear. Even if there is no contract, some people tell me, oh, Olivier, I trust you. I always say, you never know what could happen. I could be run over by a bus tomorrow. We can forget things and so on. So I always say, even if it's very friendly, it's a guy I've known for a long time, I always send bullet points to make sure we know what we've agreed, it's clear. And if something is unclear, it's an excuse to say, oh, what about this? Let's go into more details and so on. Also, you must ask your auction house and ensure that the auction house will give very accurate description. Of course, they have to be enticing, but they have to be accurate, because the last thing you want, is to have returns. Because if something doesn't match the description, the buyer has the right to return. And as we all know, there is nothing more difficult to recork a bottle of champagne. You open the champagne because you think you've sold an item for $100,000. You are very happy. You celebrate with your wife. And 2 weeks later, the auction house comes back to you and say, oh, sorry, the vendor is not paying because it's not as described. We made a mistake. We didn't disclose this little problem and so on. So very important that, people should not over-describe. It has to be absolutely accurate and yet very enticing so people want to bid. That's very, very important. You know, and the thing I would say, and it's an analogy I take, you know, quite a bit, is once you have selected your auctioneer, you know, you should trust him. You know, you should be harsh and ask a lot of questions before. But once you have selected your auctioneer, you should trust him. So the time to be harsh is before, and then you trust when you've chosen your auctioneer. And to me, I take the analogy of a dentist. When you go to a dentist, and it's a bit trivial, but you know, you trust the guy. You sit in the seat and you don't micromanage him by saying, look, you know, you should start with this teeth and go here and then do that. You just go there, you trust the guy, he knows what to do and what is best for you. I think auction house is the same. You know, be very harsh, ask a lot of questions, put a lot of constraint before. But then when we go to auction, let them do their job because they are the best at it, whoever it is. And finally, if your collection is a bit esoteric, you know, there are not many collectors around, selling a collection like that is a bit like selling a big stake, a 20-30% stake in an illiquid company. If you want to sell when there is no activity in the market, you will drive down the sell price by 20, 30, 50%. And if you sell when somebody is approaching you, you can ask for a premium. You know, you can ask for a 20, 30% premium. So it's the same with most stamp collection. And it's more true when you go into more esoteric area. When somebody is bidding for your collection, do not hesitate to hit the bid when it comes. That's very, very important. I've seen so many horror stories of people said, oh, I had one guy many years ago who was ready to pay me 2x. I said no, and now I've just sold it for 1x. So we are in illiquid markets. We don't have many buyers. It's the same thing, by the way, at Christie's Sotheby's, even in the biggest area, you know, things with $50, $100 million price items, the market is very thin at the top. We are always talking 5, 10 buyers. So when you've got a good bid, you've got, even if you are not totally ready to sell, do not hesitate to take advice, make sure the valuation is generous, and then sell it. And then auction houses can also help you to assess your collection and determine if a bid is fair or not. Okay, once selected, what you do on auction day, a few things on auction day. Well, you have to be open to credit. You have to trust the auctioneer, as I said. You have to be open to credit terms. Now, with zero interest rates or negative interest rates, sometimes collectors would say, oh, you know, your collection is fantastic. I usually spend 50,000, but I intend to spend 100,000, but I need time to sell shares to organize myself. Can I have 60 days to pay instead of the usual 35 or even 90 days? If the auctioneer comes back to you and say, well, you know, would you be ready to extend payment? The answer is yes, do it, because you will get 10, 20, 30% more at no financial cost to you. Of course, you don't want to do that to everybody, but you could limit to the number of people, and you can tell your auctioneer, okay, you can do it with 6 collectors or 10 collectors or 2 collectors or whatever. On the day, give a flexibility, we've talked about it, and one of the big rule, and that's with the reserve, the big problem we face as auctioneer, the big rule is start low to finish high, okay? That's very important. I've taken the example of the Post Office Mauritius, which is the most expensive stamp ever sold in the UK. This stamp, we started at 280, and we would have sold it at 280 if, you know, it was the only bid. And we finally sold it for a hammer of £900,000 hammer. The estimate was 300 to 400. I think the reserve was at 280. That's why we opened at 280. And we were thinking, okay, maybe, you know, it will sell, you know, 500 to 600,000 pounds. We sold it at 900,000 pounds. Why? Because the ultimate buyers, when we opened at 280, we had, I think, like 12 people trying to bid at 280, 300. So the ultimate buyer who is interested takes comfort in seeing that there is a lot of interest at 300, you know? And then, you know, at 350, there was a little bit less buyers. I think by the time we reached 600, there were 3 guys. And I think above 650 or 700, 2 guys left. But these 2 guys left, we were the logical buyers. They took a lot of comfort to see that there was a lot of support, you know, underneath. And I'm equally sure that if we had opened the lot at 600,000 pounds, we would not have sold it. So that's very, very important to really choose well where you put the reserve and when you open. That's a very important thing. Then I think it's better not to be in the auction room, but this we can discuss later on. Do not bid in your auction. Obviously, it's illegal in many countries. And if there is one piece you want to keep, I think it's important to show it in the auction so people don't say, oh, the best pieces are not there. But you have to speak to the auctioneer how you can retain that item and yet show it in the collection. And this explanation about bidding and getting people to bid is very important, because I looked a few years back at the energy it takes to raise your hand in the auction room. It takes 25 joules. So it's a lot of energy required. I mean, not much, but it's energy required to raise your hand. While taking it down, it's no energy at all. So it's very important to start low to get these arms up in the air and people bidding. You will enjoy when you sell, you will enjoy your children, you will see them, in other collection. It's a fun thing to do. And also remember, auction houses cannot perform miracles. Some of them are very, very good, and they will get for you the best price possible globally on the day. But they cannot perform miracles. If your collection is worth 100,000, it's going to be $1 million. Even though sometimes you'll be very pleasantly surprised, but it's not miracles. It's just very good results in most cases. The next 20 years of the auctions, very importantly, when you've sold, it's easier to keep 20 or 50 catalogs, for you at home to give to friends, family, than keeping your collection where you have to keep insurance and humidity control and so on. So you can watch your catalogs on eBay. And then when we advise, and actually one of the speaker last night on the New York New York Collectors Club did that. He sold his collection through us, and he started a new collection. Actually, he continued to build a new collection, but which was much less value than the other collection. So basically, my view is, if you are a collector, I'm a collector, I understand, you want to collect, till the end, so to speak, and start a collection. You've sold, you've realized the financial asset, but you love it. So continue collecting a smaller collection with 5 or 10% of a proceed, and then you leave an instruction how to sell that little collection, so it's not a burden for your children or family members. And don't be afraid to start a new chapter. So to wrap up, before we go to Q&A, I give you the 10 commandments for you to think. You might disagree with some, but it's something to get your creative juices flowing. We've seen it. You should not shop around your collection. You should not be penny wise and pound foolish. What I mean by that is, don't give an auctioneer the mandate to sell because it's 2% less than the other auctioneer, because you have to think that every increment in an auction is on average 8 to 10%. It's moved to 100 to 110. So if an auction house gets 2 increments more, or 3, which is 30%, but charge you 2% more for it, it makes a lot of sense to appoint that auction house. So that's what I call don't be penny wise, the 2%, and pound foolish, missing the 30% upside. Check the contract carefully and sign only when you are sure that everything is answered. That's very important. As I said before, you have to be very harsh, ask all the question before, and then you give a flexibility to the auctioneer after. We love at Spink, for example, to engage people before. You do not micromanage the auctioneer. You should also share all the knowledge and information, good and bad, with the auctioneer. If there is issue with provenance, you are not sure with a piece, you have some doubts, tell them right away, because then we can get certificates, we can do the work, the search to help get that in place. Do not hesitate to get certificates. Authenticate and grade is more for banknotes and coins, or get certificates if it makes sense in advance, because people will bid more aggressively if they know there is a good search. You should not hesitate to accept the credit terms. We've talked about that, especially in the current environment, it makes a lot of sense. We have talked about the not seeking to overload small value items. And you should trust that your interest and the auction house interest are perfectly aligned. The auction house just make a commission. So the higher we get for you, the more money we make. So we go to battle together. We are the same team and we want the same results. And the last point, very important, you should have fun. If you think that going with an auction house or whatever, you got second thoughts because it's not fun to deal with them, don't go, because you will be disappointed. It's going to be a tough experience. So thank you very much for your attention. Feel free to engage me on the virtual booth, or send me an email at ostocker@spink.com. I love talking about auctions. So even if you are not thinking of selling, feel free to engage me. I love it. And now I'm very happy to take any questions if there is any. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Olivier. That was absolutely wonderful. And we have got quite a few questions coming through on the chat Q&A. And actually, I've just had a text message from someone who had to leave early, but wanted to ask a question as well. So I'll walk through these. I'll start just by saying we've had a question about whether this recording will be shared with people after the talk. All of the talks are being recorded and will be available in the Spink auditorium until the 20th of October. So if you have missed it, or you would like to share it with friends, you can let people know that they can come back into the Spink auditorium to watch the talks again after the live show. First question then, from Howard Wunderlich. If your collection has very diverse areas, does it make sense to use different auction houses for the different areas? Olivier.
Yes, I mean, it's a possibility. It depends on the size of a collection. If the size of a collection is very big, like for example, tomorrow we start offering, it will be a series of many auctions, a Doyen collection, rarities of the world. Each auction will be £1 million plus. It's big enough, you can go with the same house. If it's a little bit smaller, and you have one auction house who is very specialized in South America, and another one very good at Hong Kong, yes, it's some things you can consider to go to the best place, because maybe one auction house cannot be good at everywhere. Even some auction houses like Spink and a couple of others are international. It makes sense. So, and sometimes an auction house, if you are open, they will tell you who is the best. If you are not sure who is the best, but if you've been buying, you probably have your own view. But yes, I think it's not a problem at all to break down by areas. Now, if a collection makes a lot of sense, if it's like a postal history collection where it's the same theme, but from different location, maybe it makes more sense to offer as a one group. But if there is no link between the different areas of a collection, certainly it's a possibility to break down and hire a couple of auctioneers. You don't want to deal with 10 auctioneers, but you can have certainly 2 or 3 and split the collection that way.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Another question, you mentioned earlier that even with some of the best collections that you see, that there's, I think you said about 2 to 5% of the collections, there's still a chance there may be fakes or forgeries within that. So we've got a question here, which is, and we like controversial questions, don't we, Olivier?
Yes, I love them.
What does it say about the industry when collectors are buying from some of the most prestigious dealers and auction houses in the world, to then find that there's still percentages that are fakes and forgeries within collections that they purchase?
Well, it's true that we are an industry which is, it's like the art world. We are all aware of some horror stories. I would say most players in the industry are honest, and there are some honest mistakes, that are made. First, for auction house, if there is a problem, you can go back to them and they will take it back or deal with the issue. So any reputable dealer or auction house will not leave you with a piece which is problematic and so on. But then sadly, there are some dealers or smaller auction houses who they care a bit less about the reputation, who might be a bit more sanguine and not answer your email where you have a problem. So people have to be careful. That's why you have to buy from the most reputable places. That's why I would say here, I'm sorry for my dealer's friend, but if you buy at auction, you are a bit more protected, because an auction house, by definition, we put an item in the marketplace. So you show an item, there is global marketing. If there is a problem, people will write to us, do something. We are totally transparent. If you buy into, from another collector or somebody else, and nobody has seen the piece, you don't have that exposition of the piece. and it's a bit of a problem. So I think buying at auction house is usually slightly more reassuring, but we should not worry too much. Yes, there are some issues. I think there are lots of trade bodies like the PTS, Suzanne, who are trying to deal with these problems. I strongly believe, I'm an ex-banker, I'm a CFA, a chartered financial analyst. I'm signing every year a code of ethics. I strongly believe that the industry has to be strong to eradicate the bad apple, but there are not so many. So it's a few here and there, but the fakes are not, most of the fakes are not because it's fraud. Most of them is because at the time, the knowledge 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, people thought that it was okay. And the knowledge, the technology is also progressing, and some things, people thought were good 100 years ago, now there are questions raised. And it's part of a hobby. And also we have to be careful, but sometimes there's also some games played. Some people like to create for a collector they don't like, to say, oh, this piece is unsure when there is no information. So you also have to separate, the rumors from the truth. But that's an issue. And I think that's an issue as an industry we have to address very strongly, because if we want to survive and attract new people, not only we need to go digital and virtual as we do now, but we have to make sure that everything we sell is guaranteed and we do a very good job so new people can come safely to us.
That's great.
And I must say, I say 2 to 5%, I don't know if I've mentioned, but in terms of horror stories, sometimes, we've seen collection coming to us where up to 50% of the items are problem. So it's really a good collector, the batting rate is 2 to 5, and somebody who has been buying from one person, not in a transparent system and so on, it could be as high as 50%, and then that's terrible. You feel so bad, and but that's it. So people have to be careful, but it's not as bad as some people might think.
Thanks, Olivier. And obviously, plug for us that all of the booth holders at Virtual Stampex are PTS members and PTS affiliates, so you can look for the shield with confidence at the show. Moving into a slightly different area, Olivier, we've got a question here from Nick Salter. What trends and demand are you seeing, and in particular, which countries and regions are gaining in popularity beyond China and India? Right,
yeah. So that's the obvious too. I think, for stamps, it's like everything else. You've got to look at wealth creation. You need two things. You need to have a culture of collecting, and countries, especially the former communist bloc countries, have that culture of collecting, because if you were a young pioneer in Russia 40 years ago, you were collecting stamps because stamps was a way to share the friendship between the communist nations and so on. So you need a basis of, you need the collecting culture, you need the pride in the national heritage, and you need the wealth creation. So, and of course, the question, the two areas where it's the most obvious are India and China, because that's where you've got all these three elements, and the wealth creation is very important. So, and that's why we have an office in Hong Kong, and we are, and we deal a lot with China. China is amazing, in coins, in banknotes, in stamps, in whiskies, in handbags. They are collectors. They love, and they are hunters, and they are very sophisticated buyers, everything. So basically, to me, the answer will be a little bit different. I think the guys who are going to change the world of collecting, like they have changed the world of luxury and so on, are the Chinese collectors. They are smart, they are well informed, they share a lot. And what we see at Spink, and that's why I've based myself in Hong Kong. I've been in Hong Kong for 7 years. I went there because I've been going in Hong Kong for 25 years, but I wanted to be there to really understand what's happening, because the Chinese collectors, we start to see it in stamps a little bit, but much more in coins and banknotes. They start to buy non-Chinese items, and that's going to be the big revolution. For example, we have some British banknotes auctions where some Chinese buyers are playing a big role. Same thing for British coins or European coins. Why? Because they realize that if you buy an item a banknote which is 10 known in China, you will pay $1 million for it. The same item in the UK might be only £50,000. And these guys are very smart, very financially savvy. And they said, well, my children are educated in America or in the UK. I go there regularly, I like it, and it's much better value for rarity. So I think the Chinese collectors are going to change the world of collecting for good. And I think it's a very good development. And I think some areas like, Brazil, Russia, of course, India, China, but the big countries, South Africa, they go by ups and downs. The economy is driving, devaluation of a ruble or in Brazil are affecting the ability for these people to buy in US dollars. But these big countries where wealth is created, where there is a lot of national pride, they are the one where collecting will grow. And also, India and China are the two dominant forces today in terms of new collectors and changing the lines of our hobby. I think these guys are also collecting, neighboring countries. For example, China, if you look at Mongolia, Vietnam, there is a lot of interest, and India, you can start to look at Nepal or other places. So I would look also at the neighboring countries of the big collectors. So it's a long answer. I hope I've answered partly, but it's great. This hobby is becoming international, and it's very exciting for the contacts. And I think it's good for the hobby because this is the future of the hobby. The future of the hobby is digital and it's partly Asian.
Thank you, Olivier. There's quite a few questions coming in about trends. I think we've got time for one more question if we're quick, but we do have a record of all the other questions. So obviously people can go to the Spink stand at the Spink booth and ask further questions, and we can also put some more comms out into newsletters on this. Another question is related to the trending around age profiles. So is there any changes that you're seeing within the age profile of people who are buying collections or selling collections? And then what would you say is the forecast for any changes in that over the next 10 years?
Sorry, just to be sure, it's about the age, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's so basically of all the categories Spink is involved in, stamps has the least favorable demographics. And I'm always direct, and those of you who read my articles in the Spink Insider, I'm always talking from the gut. I've got to be honest here. Stamps is the most challenging. In banknotes, in coins, in medals, we have a lot of young buyers, people in their 30s and 40s. They really come. Sometime on new auctions, we acquire, 50, 100 new buyers. In stamps, if we acquire 5 or 10 new buyers in an auction, and we've been acquiring, we've been in business for 350 years, and we've been acquiring new collectors since we've moved digital when we launched Spink Live 2 years ago in stamps, but we acquire at a much lower rate than in other categories. So what I think is most of the buyers of stamps are in the 55 to 80 years old, okay? And it's obvious when you go to a show, you start to, there is a lot of gray hair, and that's a fact. And we don't have as many young collectors as we have in other categories. Why? Because if you have never collected stamp as a kid, it's unlikely you are going to start collecting stamps at 50 when you have more time and more money. While coins or medal or banknotes, it's money, or whiskey or handbags, it's more immediate to acquire. So I think that's one of the big challenges for stamps is the age profile, but I am not worried. The hobby is evolving. It will not be the same as it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or even 5 years ago. We have to, when we do auction, we have to do lots differently, offer different things. And I think our ability, it's very important to attract new collectors. So that's why we change the catalogs. That's why we go more online. And I think one chance for philately is postal history, because postal history is very exciting. It's, you tell a story, and I think we can bring a lot of new guys, via postal history. And I see in these countries where there is dynamism, like we talked about China and India, there are lots of young collectors. So the countries who are booming, there are lots of young collectors. And I think something we've tried and you know, the problem with stamps and the sadness is it would be so nice to have, you know, an opinion leader, a key influencer who would disclose that I'm a stamp collector. For example, there was a very attractive woman tennis player who is a stamp collector. She never wanted to really go public. We know at Spink a few guys, or you know, it's mainly guys, who are really, would be fantastic for the hobby if they were ready to disclose, you know, their collecting passion. But I don't know why stamp collectors are more discreet than banknotes or coin collectors or medal collectors. They are closet collectors. Myself, you know, I'm a passionate guy. I love a lot of good things in life, but I've been a closet collector for 35 years. When I left JP Morgan, when I say I bought Spink, I'm leaving the bank, people were saying, Olivier, you are crazy. And you, a stamp collector, you? So a lot of people are, you know, don't dare to share this thing. And I think it's for you, the PTS, for, you know, the New York Collectors Club, the RPSL. I know our friends at the RPSL are doing a lot of work for that all over the world, is to get new people, young, but also for me, what is the most important is the guys who are 50, in their 50s, the kids have been educated, bring their passion to the hobby, their knowledge, they are savvy. And I think we are not far from being there. So I'm not worried, but the next 5 years are quite important to get a few opinion leaders. And I know, again, you know, I'm doing some free advertising for the RPSL, but I know the guys at the RPSL are doing a great job. I'm less familiar with the New York Collectors Club, but I'm sure they do. But they are doing a great job for that. It's, you know, getting the right reps, getting the momentum, because our hobby is absolutely fantastic. When you explain your hobby to somebody who doesn't collect, they like it. So it's just a matter of communication. We have to know that stamps and postal history, you know, it's an acquired taste, and we've got to work on that a bit more. But I'm certainly very, very confident we will get it right. But I've got no doubt. And if you look at the hobby, at the press, since the 1890s, when the first commemorative stamps were issued, every generation of dealers and auctioneers and observers have always said, after me, this is the end of the hobby. And for 150 years, people have said, oh, I'm the last generation to collect because, you know, stamps are finished. You know, it's changing. It's just changing. It's a different way. We'll collect in a different way. We'll show our collection in a different way. But they are witnesses of history. They are very, very important. And if we are not too stupid and too clumsy in the way Spink and the PTS and the RPSL and New York Collectors Club, the way we communicate, I have no doubt we will be successful.
I absolutely agree, Olivier. I think we're all proud philatelists, and certainly with things like Virtual Stampex, just seeing how much there is going on at social media. I think people are, you know, boasting about their hobby, and the more we do that, the more we'll have these opinion leaders come and get out of the closet and join us. So it's an exciting time for the hobby. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We have had some other questions, and we will take a note of those and make sure that we put some notes into the upcoming Stampex newsletters on those. And obviously, all of you, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Spink and to Olivier for the talk, and we hope that many of you will head over to the Spink booth now to continue the conversation.
Very good. Thank you very much all for your attention. Have a great day.